Welcome to the podcast that buffs your Hearthstone game. This is Velen's Chosen.
Not all who wander are lost.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to Velen's Chosen, episode 141. This week, we got a visionary joining us as a listener, now a content creator on Twitter doing What's the Deck. We have the man, the myth, the bearded legend. We have Novelist. What's up, Novelist?
I'm doing well. Oh, thank you for having me on here. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, it's great to finally get you on here. And with the strong pushing of the Discord community, they're kind of pushing you, like, push them on. Okay.
They're like, never less.
Yeah, that was all Samurai Flea and Steven Sensei.
Yeah.
And like pressuring you, then pressuring me to talk to you and all that stuff.
Questioning
Peer pressure,
my
that's what it
Samurai
was.
Bushido honor code. But yes, we finally got you on here, and we have a special normal guest. We have Grant Gould and Eve Martin. What's up, guys?
Oh, normal guests. So I'm not even actually a
You guys
host.
are
I'm just a
boring.
normal guest. Oh,
This
I
is
see.
actually Rob's show, and we're all just guests in it.
That's why I'm wearing an Overwatch shirt for a Velen's Chosen podcast on about Hearthstone. Come at me, ask me anything. So this week,
just a normal guest.
This week, we are starting off on the wrong foot in all the right ways. We have a
wordplay.
lot of cool news. Finally, like we said last week, when the news is the driest, typically that means that we have the most stuff coming. And Blizzard's been doing a good job at not just giving us announcements of the announcements, but giving us a third announcement of the announcement of the announcement. So they're talking about giving the community some more information. They're like, hey, we're going to tell you guys about something on this date. And it probably we'll talk about cards getting nerfed, and here's the reason why. And then they're telling us, hey, these are the cards getting nerfed, but not yet. We're not going to tell you when. And then they're going to tell us when the cards are nerfed. We're like, we told you like 2 months ago. So anyways, this is just typical Blizzard balance changing and upping their quote unquote communication skills with the community PR, which has always been such a fun zoo. You can ask me about my opinions anytime. You guys, I sounded way saltier on that than I actually intended, because I actually think it's a great idea. But we're gonna talk about the card nerfs. Nonetheless, we're gonna talk about the Tavern Brawl, and then Grant and Novelist have been playing this ridiculous deck that originally we talked about last week. As I was like, well, if you're really wanting to try Timmying on the ladder, you can play Togwaggle Druid. And they're like, that's a wild deck. It's like, only if you want it to be. You can bring it to standard and try it out. Well, we're talking about it this week, and Grant thinks it's pretty good. So we're going to talk about that.
Does 20 and 12 mean it's good? Does the 2012 record mean it's good on ladder?
It's pretty fun too.
At what point is a meme bad? All right.
As long as you are having fun.
Yeah, exactly. Let us know. What are they doing? We want details. And Blizzard's like, yeah, we're going to give details.
Well,
good
first, this
check.
week's Brawl was top 2, and I want to hear what each of you made. Did you just grab something off the internet, or did you go in with your own thing?
Does
what did
Discord
you do for the
count
Brawl?
as the internet? Because just reading discussion kind of sort of counts, right? Because it's a 2 deck list.
Yes. If you just took it off of Discord, then that's like reading the internet. Sorry, you did not do your own thing.
Okay, well, before we get into this, Eve, we have to let the guests know who Novelist is that aren't integrated with all of the Discord servers as much as Ridiculous Hat and Wicked did, okay?
This
So,
is true. This
Novelist,
is true.
Yes. Standard
let us
procedure.
know who you are, how you started finding us and listening, and then you also started transitioning into creating stuff recently, right? So this is a couple months back, I think, right?
Yeah, right before Christmas or right after Christmas.
Yeah,
or right
I
after
think that's right.
December. And that's when I jumped in. Well, I guess it goes back a couple of years. I started I had a friend tell me about Hearthstone, told me it was like Magic the Gathering, but you can play it anywhere, kind of, so I was like, oh. And I was like, I kind of like that. It's, it was a little different. He said it's a little trade. Well, you can't block unless there's taunt and stuff like that. There's a few differences.
Right.
Yeah.
And yeah, and so I got into it, started playing it, but really had no one to play with. I kind of got my brother into it, but he kind of fell off. He was more of a League of Legends player, so he liked doing that more than playing Hearthstone. But and I started just kind of like after a while, after about a year of playing, I just kind of like put it down, then picked it back up, put it down, kind of like one of those things. And then because the only podcast I really listened to that I knew about for Hearthstone was the Happy Hearthstone, and I believe Josh was doing it at the time before Andrew.
Yeah.
And so I really enjoyed that. But then I was like searching for Hearthstone podcast one day, and actually your guys' podcast came up, and I was like, I'll give it a listen. And this is when you're focusing more on, I guess, the budget friendly player, I think, budget stuff. So which is good because I did have a full collection because I was playing off and on. So I really enjoyed it, and it really helped me, get decks and pick up my game. And then you mentioned you guys had a Discord, so I was like, okay, I'll get involved in the Discord. And then so that was, I think it was sometime way last year that I got involved with Discord, talked to a lot of you, and kind of like re-energized to play Hearthstone because there's people I was getting to know, friends I was making, and Hearthstone is so much better if you know people, if you know the community, you're involved in it. It makes the game worth playing. It really does. This is a fun game by itself, but it's so much more fun with the community. And so I got involved in that. And then I think Grant, I think you decided, I think in March or something, to make a This Time Legend push. And so you got a bunch of us together. I'm sure it was March or April. I can't remember last year.
It might have been February or March. You might have been right. You might be right though, because that's when we started that's when we took it from being just a bet between me, Blister Guy, and Cinder. And I was just like, all right, I'm gonna coin this and like put it on the internet in like word form. And then we did it in the Discord, and that was when everybody in the Discord started hitting Legend for the first time, and it was fun.
Yeah, I think that's right after they made the rank floors where if you hit 15 or 10 or 5, you couldn't fall back. So that made it a little bit easier, so you don't have to worry about. You kind of can experiment a little bit too if you hit a little bit of a wall or something.
Yeah, the following.
So anyway,
month,
a bunch of us. Yeah. Oh, go ahead. What were you saying?
No, I was just saying it was the following month that happened, but I think some of you guys did it the hard way. I think some of y'all just like.
I think might have. I can't remember. But so that's when Pirate Warrior and Aggro Shaman was running amok. That's when those days there was like you're playing those decks too.
Yeah, when people were frustrated at individual decks instead of rock paper scissors. So it just depended on what the flavor was on Reddit. So at that time.
Exactly.
Yep.
So after that, I started going to get involved in more Discords, Patreon tournaments from Coin Concede, the Hero Power podcast, and so getting to know more people. Then, but your podcast and your Discord is really what kept me in the game because I was ready to kind of just like put the game down, just like Then I kind of discovered all of you, so I was like, that was awesome. So. Thank you. I want to say that personally. Thank you to all of you. And so that you're kind of like one of the main reasons I'm still doing what I'm doing and still playing. So there you go.
Sweet.
And so I decided that because you guys put a lot of effort, other people put a lot of effort into creating content that I wanted to do something as well to give back to the community. But I didn't want to do another podcast. I felt there was a lot of good podcasts out there, and I didn't want to, in a sense, not compete, but I didn't want to add to even more. So I was like, what if I do? And this is funny how I came up with the idea. I was actually basically sick, like 2:00 in the morning, high on NyQuil, and I came up with this idea. That's how
all of the good ideas start like this, guys.
Yes. I was just like laying in bed. I was like, what can I do? And I was like, what if I make videos for Twitter? I'm like, well, how long can a Twitter video be? And it was like 2 minutes and 20 seconds. I'm like, okay, can I talk about a deck in less than 2 minutes? I'm like, I'm sure I can. So
sweet.
That's where the idea came on. I just worked on it, and then I was thinking, what can I call it? Then What the Deck came to my mind that night, and I kind of stuck with it. And they kind of say stick with your like first ideas or first, and it was like What the Deck, and because how many times have us like when we're playing, we face like a brand new deck that we don't know, or something happens to us and we go, what the heck, or even worse, like, yeah, we're like, so it's kind of a play on words like what the deck. Yes.
Words that end in CK. Got it.
Yeah. And now I pretty much yell what the deck and my wife laughs at me. But anyway, but that's where it came along. Then I started wanted to do a little bit of wild content, so I kind of rotate between standard and wild decks, and I try to
Okay.
do not to make too like I guess it's hard to make very like budget wild decks, but there's some wild decks that only have like 1 or 2 legendaries, and that's it. And because the cards are so powerful that sometimes legendaries are even outclassed with, and it's kind of crazy how that is in wild. But I started doing that, and I've enjoyed it. I've enjoyed the feedback that all of you have given me, and it's just a fun thing. And I plan on keep producing content, and now I'm part of the UHL, the United Hearthstone League, which Eve, you're part of that, and which I'm covering your game. So in the next couple of days, you'll a podcast of me talking about your game. So, but I was watching it today. Yes. But now I'm on the UHL podcast as well. So I'm doing content that way with the UHL, along with a video that I just kind of highlight a deck once a week for UHL as well. So that's kind of what I'm involved in right now.
It's funny how the dominoes fall. Like once you start committing to something, it's just like something else pops up and you're like, oh, this seems like a good idea. And then it's like it's really surprising how not just like with what you're doing, but I think just in general, when you do something that you're passionate about, you realize how much more time in a day that you like have for it, or you like put into it. And you're just like, I don't know where this time comes from, but it's there and it happened. And it just like because it doesn't seem like something you're really carving out when you enjoy it, right? So it's just like it's really, really nice. Even if like I've talked about this multiple times on the show, but there are lots of pockets of time where when you produce content a lot, in the podcast form especially, podcasters really like talking about what they do rather than doing what they do, if that makes sense, because that's what podcasting is. So you'll find Grant.
How much Hearthstone did you play this week? Not at all, but I can talk for 2 hours about it.
I can talk for 60 minutes about it. And then if you had 2 more people, another 60 minutes about it.
Yeah. Well, the deck's not like that. I actually have to play the deck, so that kind of keeps me like, even when I don't feel like playing, I'm like, I need to play this deck so I know what I'm talking about. Because...
Right. So it keeps you carving time in different ways depending on what you're doing.
Yeah.
Right? So I would imagine that some of the guys that work for OmniSlash are a lot like that. You know, Kibler's very talkative on stream. Zalay always talking out loud. You know, even the quiet guy, Firebat, loves talking about really silly things just to keep his mouth running on the stream to stay entertaining. So it's really, really good stuff. But let's get into the news now that we know who you are. Okay. So this week's Tavern Brawl, again, pick 2 cards. You can play them, but it's standard. Now, I will say there's a disclaimer if you were like, this is standard. There was, I guess, a brief exploit on this where some people were able to run wild cards, but I don't even know what it is. And if we did know what the exploit was, we probably
if you made a deck with the deck code, we shouldn't let them know?
We probably shouldn't let people know how to do it.
Okay, never mind. I won't tell you how. But I think that they've stopped it right now. I don't think it's possible anymore. Yeah.
So basically, people were running like the old combo that was rampaging this last time, which was the Metal Tooth Leaper Mech Warper one from Hunter, and then there was another one that was Cold Light Vertical and Naturalize. So I tried a couple different versions of that because I needed a win 3 with Druid and a win 2 in general. So I just picked Druid and I ran 3 different ones. I ran the guide, the Forest Guide, and Naturalize, and then I also ran Naturalize and Ferocious Howl.
Can you remind people what Forest Guide is?
Forest Guide is a 4-mana 1/6 minion that at the end of a turn, both players draw a card. Or at the end of your turn, I think. And then the other card, Ferocious Howl, is the one that we talked a lot about in a previous episode, where you will draw a card, and then it will do a scan of how many cards you have in your hand and add that much armor to your hero. And then I also tried the other one, which I saw somebody doing, which was the Ironwood Golem and Oaken Summons combo. But I ended up losing to a mill deck with doing that because I kept seeing all of these mages. So I was like, okay, whatever. But it ended up being okay. My last win was the best because it was Firefly and Power of the Wild. And the guy I was playing against was running... I didn't see what his other card was. I would assume it was the Spellstone, but he was just running Explosive Trap. So all I did was run into an explosive trap, and then all of my minions were 2/3 down to 2/1s, and then I put 2 more fireflies on the board, and then Power of the Wild twice, and he was at 10. So
Nice.
that was a ridiculous deck. If you want to get some quick wins and farm gold, that would be the way to go. But Eve, Grant, Novelist, what'd you guys do?
I'll tell you what I was running. I saw Zixo was running Twig of the World Tree and Starfire. So what you do is you play Twig of the World Tree. Your next turn, you break it. You get 10 mana. You cast Starfire in their face, which does 5 damage. You draw a card, and then repeat until they're dead. I did that a bunch. I farmed quite a bit of gold.
If
It was
you
so
draw
nasty.
Let's repeat.
Yeah.
It is
Just keep
basically you can actually get stalled out if you just draw like just so happen to not get what you need.
Right.
But like 90% of the time, it works all the time. So
That's crazy. I saw a video of that. That was
Posted one.
I
Yeah.
just watched it. It was like, what is going on here? Then it hit me. I see what's going on.
Yeah.
it
Thanks,
was
Toast.
fun.
Thanks for the memes, buddy.
Yeah.
I can't remember who gave me the idea of doing the Murloc. Was it
Oh.
Murloc Tidecaller and Power Word
Ugh.
Shield? Because I had quest for priest games, so I did that one.
Tide
Mm. It
Caller.
worked pretty
Oh
well.
my goodness. So drawing a card
I
and
got 2
beefing up the
games.
health. That's gross.
Yep. Just keep putting down Murlocs, keep buffing them up, keep drawing cards. It worked really well.
I beat a shaman. I wasn't quite sure what they were trying to do, but they ran the Echo Murloc and War Leader.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just kind of milled them out. So
Yeah.
Interesting.
it was really weird.
I was playing the Mana Worm Arcane
Mhm.
Arcane Missiles.
I tried
And
that one.
so
That's a classic
I
one.
just it's a classic one. So I'm like, I'm gonna throw it. I just want to get my win, get right now before I mess around with it. And so I played that, and like turn 1, I had the coins. So turn 1, my opponent passes. I'm like, okay, he's playing mage also, or he or
Mhm.
she's playing mage.
Mhm.
They pass. I'm like, okay, what are they doing? But I had Mana Worm, coin, Mana Worm, pass, and then they like fire. Basically used their hero power one of my Mana Worms. Then I played 2 more Mana Worms, passed again, and I had like 3 Arcane Missiles, like basically ready to go for next turn. I'm just like, he just conceded.
It's
So I was
over.
like,
So you have no
Oh,
idea what was even in his deck.
he didn't play anything, or she didn't play anything. So I was like, okay, cool, free pack, thank you.
What?
It's a mystery.
Probably
I
had like a
saw-
bunch of high drop cards.
I saw
Yeah.
a deck that I lost to that actually seemed really fun. If you guys are interested, you run a mage list and you have Sorcerer's Apprentice and Primordial Glyph, and you just roll the
Yeah, I
dice.
saw that.
It's really cool.
They lost to
It's really
me.
cool. They destroyed me, but that's because I was trying to mill them, and that
Oh.
doesn't work very well when you just can basically cast your spells for free over and over again.
You want to
Knife
hear
Juggler Call to Arms. Oh,
That's pretty
wicked
nutty.
good.
Yeah. you want to hear a fun combination. It doesn't work, but I heard someone did this. They put Stone Tusk Spore and the Rogue Quest.
That
was the way to
card. Because you
Oh,
have
no.
Oh
it
yeah,
in
you
your
get
opening hand.
all quests in your
Well, there's-
mulligan.
Yes,
That's awful.
I was laughing. It was like, that's just a bad combination.
I have to tip my hat.
Yeah.
There was a guy that was the meme king that I beat, but he ran Prep and Mimic Pod and killed himself, and it was
What?
glorious. It was actually glorious. That was amazing, and I had to use the thankful emote before I killed him in fatigue, because I had the one where you just mill them against this guy. So I was just like, this guy is the enjoyer of fun. Oh my goodness. Just drawing
Oh,
cards
wow.
every turn into your deck and try to kill yourself before they can kill you is pretty sweet.
Do you remember way, way, way back when there was a tavern brawl where the person won who killed themselves first?
Yes.
Mm.
That they need to
That's
bring that
funny.
one back.
I remember when we used to do that in our little Google Hangouts, because I did that with a friend of mine.
Yeah. That's
But
fun.
Yeah.
This
Everybody
is
runs
back
Gul'dan
in,
and
like,
just
Goblins versus Gnomes and TGT were the only expansions, so your card pool was super limited. But now there's so many good ways to kill yourself that like we had to start banning
Wow.
entire class archetypes. Like originally you couldn't play Warlock because Warlock would just kill themselves way too quick. You have literally every minion that you just play and then kill themselves. You
Yeah.
play like Pit Lords and
It's too easy.
yeah, it was
You
way
can't
too
bring
easy.
Warlock.
And then you could cast Shadow Bolts on the the 4/3 minion that's like 2 mana. It's like super busted, but any damage it takes, your hero takes. So you can use your removal on your own minion and take damage.
Yeah, it's
I
like
remember doing that.
Demon Knight or something. It's just
Yeah.
or something like that.
Dread Knight or
Yeah.
something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, I
And
know
then,
what
It's
you're
on
talking
Trollden where they buff it up to like ridiculous amounts of health and then give it to their opponent.
Yep.
And then have this thing that when it dies,
And
it
then do a
does
Defile
2 damage to everything and do a Defile string. Yeah.
Yeah.
It was pretty
It's the
That's
most amusing
crazy.
thing you can do in Wild for sure.
hilarious.
Speaking of amusing things, let's talk about serious stuff with the balance changes. So we got one of the balance changes is the one that we actually wanted to see more than
When
anything
they will
else.
go live when?
These actually go live the 22nd, which is ironically the same day as Overwatch's 2nd year anniversary event starting up. So we'll get some new balance changes. This will be Tuesday in United States time. And we don't know specifically the exact time, I believe, but it's, you know, if there's anything that's true, patch day is usually about noon Pacific. So just wait until that time. And it is daylight time for those of you global. Pacific Daylight, aka California, is daylight time if you want to Google it. Talked a lot with Smiley and some other people in different Discords, and I'm going to try to be better about giving global time zones for when things start. That being said, the first one is Naga Sea Witch. This is the one that we wanted to see for months and months and months outside of another card that is conveniently not on the list, which is Barnes. So we're hoping that that kind of hits it a little bit later on. Maybe they're going to do a more wild-centric one only much later in the next expansion, but we're not sure yet.
I don't think it's being seen as much in Wild. Like, it's not a huge problem like it was in the past. There's so many other things that are being played in Wild right now that Barnes has kind of fallen off of the radar, but Naga Sea Witch, still going strong.
Well, to
The
be
discussion
sure,
I've heard about it is like everything that makes a really early combo that you can't deal with is something they're targeting. Like turn 5 is pretty early in the game.
Yeah.
It warps
So
the meta. It warps the meta because you have to run cards to deal with it, even if you don't. And it's just every deck has to run something.
Yeah.
You have Druid running Poison Seeds because of Naga Sea Witch. That's why they run that card.
the entire meta is
you're just
determined
running
by how you deal with the Sea Witch business, right? Yeah. Now, the
Pretty
balance
much.
change that is coming is Naga Sea Witch's effect remains the same, and the cost goes to 8. So it is an 8 mana card, making all of your other mana cards in your hand 5. So you cannot play any other cards besides Sea Witch on the turn it's played, unless you find some way to cheat it out with, like we said, like with Barnes or with a a card that's like there's a card in Shaman. Why can't I think about this? Ancestors
I know what you're talking
Call.
about. Yeah.
Ancestors Call, where it summons a minion out of both players' hands for 4 mana. So you can do something like that. But I wanted to highlight before we talk about everything here. I don't believe we mentioned this on the show, but I wanted to say that we mentioned this extensively in discussions in other Discords and in our current Discord for Velen's, that the reason you don't see certain changes for cards is that Blizzard is very, very simplistic with when they adjust a card to realistically do the absolute best job they can with, if they're going to change it, they're going to change one thing on the card. And by that, I mean if there's a number or there's a word, they're going to try to change one and not anything else.
Yeah.
So, and they said that the most elegant way to change cards is usually their primary thing that they look at is if the mana cost can be adjusted first, and then the attack and health is kind of the next thing. And then they start messing with the card text. So a lot of these things you're going to see have to do with that. So Naga Sea Witch stays the same except for one thing. 5 mana to 8 mana on the cost. Spiteful Summoner is another card. The cost goes from 6 to 7. Dark Pact. This card stays the same, but the health number is 4 in the heal and not 8. Possessed Lackey goes up to 6 mana and is from 5. And Call to Arms is now 5 mana, up from 4. And the last is the Crystal Core Rogue Quest, which means that any minions that it makes and buffs as a static aura are now 4/4 instead of 5/5. Okay, so all of these things are one thing that Blizzard has changed. And if you go back into the history of Blizzard and all of the card nerfs that they've done, it's traditionally one thing that they're adjusting. So when you ever want a card to be nerfed and you're looking at people's ideas on Reddit, it's really exciting to see what people think. And they're like, oh, this is an elegant change, or this is cool. And they might be right. But if you want to have an accurate prediction of what Blizzard's going to do, the first and foremost thing that you should be considering is, how can I change this card where I change one thing? And that's it.
Mm-hmm.
Because that will help the most in interpreting what Blizzard might do predictively, and also how to help newer players or infrequently consistent players, inconsistent players that play the game, to come back and return and like, why is my card different? What's the only thing that's different here? So anyways, Novelist, what are you going to say?
I heard, I think I can't remember where I read it, or it was an interview they did with some developers. They look at changing the mana cost first. That's one of the first things they look at. Then the attack and the health is the second thing. Then changing the card text would be the third thing, just because of simplistic reasons. Because that's the easiest to understand is, like you said, the mana cost, it bumps up 1 or bumps up 2. That's easy to understand, or the attack and health. But when you get to the text, that's when it gets more complicated, I guess, for newer players.
Well, we stop reading cards, right? We just look at the picture. We know what it does. No, Blizzard knows we don't read it. So if you haven't been playing for a while, you're not going to stop and read all your cards and be like, do they still do the same thing I thought they did before?
Mm-hmm.
But if the mana's changed, you literally can't play it on that turn, so you're not going to make a mistake. You just can't play it at all. And all of these changes they were talking about were to address power level, trying to make sure that these different very popular decks are kind of brought to the same level as the rest of the decks, like Paladin and Warlock being very powerful and kind of trying to bring them down a little bit, but also early game, because it feels bad to feel like you have no chance really early on in a game.
Mm-hmm.
That if you don't have certain cards in your deck, you might as well just concede right off, right? So they're trying to give people more of a chance to be able to respond to all of these crazy things that these decks can do. So Naga Sea Witch won't be able to pull off their crazy combo till turn 8. Spiteful Summoner won't be pulling 12/12s out until turn 7.
Mm-hmm,
so it gives us a bit more time for the mid-range decks and the aggro decks to kind of have a game plan. And
it gives you
to
3
what they're
turns you
gonna
have to
do.
wait. And max, I think the earliest you can get it out outside of Barnes would be luck, like RNG effects, or you have to wait until turn 7 after a charge of what's his name, Emperor Thrasan. Those are the other alternatives that I was thinking about. But even when you drop Naga Sea Witch, you get the pairing of dropping something else with it for free. That's typical thing. So they're like, if you're gonna do this ridiculous thing, you're gonna wait until turn 8 to do it, or turn 7 to do it.
My favorite nerf here is Dark Pact, because I've been saying for a long time that Warlock has too much heal. For something that is usually the downside in their deck is like, we get to do these crazy things, but we're damaging ourselves. Dark Pact gave them way too much heal. It made it way less risky to do all those things that they were doing, because they knew I have 2 spells that can just immediately give me 8 health, plus the other the Spellstone as well, depending on how much they've been damaging themselves. So they can do more healing than other healing classes.
Mm-hmm.
So that was just sort of out of whack for me. So I really like the change of now it only restores 4 health down from 8, and that might make them I'm a little more careful about how much they tap and how much damage they take, and just make them play a little more carefully.
Yeah, not with reckless abandon, just life tapping and taking damage. Yeah.
Like, I know I'm gonna be able to heal myself for 16. Like,
Yeah, it's a lot of heal. It's a lot of heal.
Thoughts?
Yeah.
Grant?
I liked all the nerfs. I didn't think any of them nerfed any cards from, or nuked any cards from orbit, so to speak. I think Naga Sea Witch is probably the hardest nerf, because you put all your Naga Sea Witch's stuff down, and you fill up the board with giants. It's like, I can Twisting Nether, I can Equality Consecrate, I can. What else can I do?
The priests.
I can do Psychic Scream.
Psychic
I can do all kinds of stuff. I mean, all the classes that have decent board clears now have more of a chance to draw into that and have a chance to deal with the board. So it's cool.
Yeah.
It basically just makes it more like it just gives other decks a chance so that because I mean, if they drop all that stuff on turn 5 and you don't have the exact right answer, you just lose. No matter what class you are. So yeah, I like them.
My favorite is Possessed Lackey. If you go my Twitter timeline and scroll back, you'll see how my relationship with that card is. And
and you feel like this is going to
Just
put it
put-
in a place where it's a lot less oppressive?
it's going to slow it down a turn because what was really oppressive is with the coin is when they coined out a Possessed Lackey on turn 4, or if they
Pointed out on
played
turn
Lackey
5 with
plus
the-
Dark Pack
Yeah.
on turn 5 and getting a Void Lord healing for 8, and if you don't have a Breaker or an Iron Beak Cow or a Sap, you're just going to sit there till you go through it. And it just like it was always that one turn. It's like if I could push damage just through, but then they would heal for 8 because of the whole thing. So I think the whole making the combo one turn, basically pushing it back a turn and then only healing for 4 and not healing for 8, because like you said, Eve, that was like a lot of health they were healing, because you would get them down to like, sometimes 5, 6, or 7, and then all of a sudden, boom, they're back at like 16, and you're just like, what just happened? And they have a Void Lord too. You're just
Yeah, and I mean,
so that
and you've
always
already been
frustrated
pushing
me.
so hard to get them to that point that you're like almost out of gas, and then when you see their health go back up by 8, you're like, I don't have enough left in the tank. I can't even make that. Like
You're
by
just
the
like-
time I get rid of Void Lord, like there's nothing left here. There's no
that,
chance.
when I was talking with Steve, Wicked Good in our Discord, as well as a couple of their friends, I told people that Warlock is not going to be knocked down a peg of power until they adjust 2 cards, and they've got to adjust the right ones that work together. So I think that the only cards they could have adjusted would have been like Spellstone, or these 2 cards, or Void Lord, or they could have adjusted the Skull of Minari. But it's like, if you look at all the cards, yeah, there were some people whining about Doomguard as well, but it's like, if you look at all of the cards that they could have adjusted, you want them to adjust the cards that are going to rotate, that are problems, right? You don't want them to adjust classic cards that have been balanced over the scope of many, many metas that are still good, and even if they're cheated out, there's a price. The problem was the price didn't exist anymore because you could do it so cheaply that the price for destroying your minion or having a minion that's destroyed that gives you a beneficial effect and you don't really have to worry about it for 6 mana is just like too much. So what they're doing now with the combination move of these 2 things, I felt like that is the thing that's going to make this a little bit easier, because not only are, like Novelist was saying, not only do they have the delay of turn, but when they are delayed and they do the combo and heal, they are not just 1 turn behind, they're 1 turn behind plus their resource that they are behind in order to block. So if they do get the block in with the Void Lord, then they're not healing back up as much. And if you're playing a good deck, like this is going to improve the matchup with that Hunter list so much more, because you can just go over the top with the hero power.
I'm sorry to say it, but Ziggy would have been dead if this nerf had been in before our game.
Oh yeah.
Mm.
There's so many scenarios where if they only healed, even 5 instead of 8, they would have been toast.
I had her down to 2 health, man. 2.
Oh, I've been there as well.
I love you, Ziggy. It was a great game.
Yeah, I think
fun.
that the big thing too is it's going to be good for those players, because they're going to have to really, really milk their draw cards and saving their burn that damage themselves instead of like just doing it on cooldown, because they have to get the full Spellstone heal now. I feel like that's just like how you're going to have to play Warlock from now on.
They're going to have to take that into account, I think, instead of just having Dark Pact to sort of save their butts.
So I'm glad, Novelist, you brought that up. Like, it's not just one of the 2 cards, although you can really hate on one of them. I feel like this together is really what needed to happen. You know what I mean? So let's talk about Call to Arms real quick. This is the other big ticket one in Standard, outside of Crystal Core, which affected more of the upper level community. I feel like kind of like the I don't know, the dad legend, mom legend community type people don't really experience how
I didn't see much of it on ladder, honestly.
This is really
I wasn't
that bad.
Yeah.
So we can talk about it a little bit, though, because I know that Grant and Novelist, you guys have probably played up against Crystal Core a little bit more than the rest of us here. But with relationship to Call to Arms, there's a lot of people saying that this particular adjustment is just going to, like, oh, well, they'll just slot it in even Paladin. Like, you're going to go to town, and even Paladin is just going to be better than, or sorry, odd Paladin is going to be better than
odd,
even.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, because now it's only going to draw 1-drops.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, well, not only is the power level going to 5, right? But when you put into an even deck, it doesn't draw higher cost minions. The whole point of running in an even deck was that A, it pulls out multiple minions, and B, when it pulls out minions, it's cheating mana because you're going from 4. You're doing a 6 mana play for 4, and that's why the card's good. Now you're spending 5 mana to use 3 and thin your deck, so it's kind of like it's like a 3.5 mana play for 5 mana in an odd deck. Maybe even you could virtually say it's just a 4 mana play for 5 mana as well, depending on how you build the deck, right? So personally, I think that this is an elegant change. It's gonna allow people to play even Paladin and actually have a decent like split between the power level of even and odd together. And then if you're gonna see Call to Arms, I feel like you're gonna be running a Murloc build, or you're just gonna be running an aggressive like face deck that's like a face without Baku and without Gen. That's just my initial opinions on this. But again,
still gonna see play, I think. Honestly,
You'll see
because there's lots of times where you didn't have it on turn 4. So I mean, and it was still a good card. They're not gonna run it in even anymore, but you could just put it in a regular Paladin, like without Gen or Baku, and just making a normal aggro Paladin.
I still think Murloc Paladin will run it because it's still basically draw 3 cards, play 3 minions, 5 mana. It's still pretty good value.
Right.
But Odd's definitely not running it.
I actually think it'll actually make some Paladin better because the 5-drop slot in Paladin is a slot that is very vacant. There's not a lot in there in any build.
That's true.
You might have 1 or 2 tops, but even then it's like, well, not really good 5-drops. Megasaur's 4.
Is it 4?
So like if you now have Call to Arms now becomes a 5-drop slot, it opens up some of the other 4-drop slots, which Paladin is replete with. So when they said that was 5-drop and it does exactly the same thing, I'm like, okay, I'll just not play odd or even. Big whoop. Lottie frickin' da. Mm-hmm. So I actually think that people will just retool Paladin. It'll just be just as good as it has always been. I just think it'll just kind of...
Wild.
Yeah. I mean, in Wild, yeah. Right? You just run Dude Paladin and with... Quartermasters and level up, and okay, those are the only things that it competes with really in Wild.
Shielded mini bots
for days. So I'm not convinced that that's really going to feel like a nerf. I think the other nerfs really open up the room for, like we had talked about, like Odd Rogue, how we said, Odd Rogue seems like it should be good, but it just doesn't have that really strong win condition to like really push to the end, because it can't compete with the strength of some of the other stuff, or the soonness of like what Warlock can do and what Paladin can do. And so like what I'm going to call a more traditional aggro deck, like what Hunter tends to want to do or what Rogue can do, those decks now I think have an extra turn or maybe 2 extra turns to kind of do what they want to do before they get stifled.
Yeah, like Hunter did definitely feel like the deck is so strong, but it's like, how is this deck not being played? You know what I mean? Like when you're playing Odd Hunter, you're just like, this deck is so strong. And then you're playing against these other things and you're like, I have so much damage and I'm losing with this? You know what I mean? Like that's what I felt like when Hunter stopped getting played. It's just like, there's too much healing in Warlock, or
with what was
there's
already
just too
out
much
there.
damage that too fast from Paladin. It just snowballed out of control.
Yeah.
So I really like this because Call to Arms is like the snowball starts now, and Possessed Lackey, again, Novelist said, like Possessed Lackey is when the snowball begins. Answer this or the game's over. And Spiteful Summoner, it's another card like that. So I think that Hunter's a deck, not even just Odd Hunter, just Hunter in general, I feel like is going to be very scary moving forward. And there's a lot of folks that I've been hearing on Twitter just like look out, Priest's coming. Priest is not getting touched, and da-da-da-da. It's like, well, yeah, Priest has not gotten touched, and it's probably still going to be just as good as it was prior, and everything's getting knocked down a peg.
Who says Priest is bad now?
But who
Just
says
nobody's playing it.
exactly? Who says Priest is bad now?
There's plenty
We're
of
all
good
just
Priest
a
decks
little
out there.
tired of Priest, okay? We're all a little
I know.
exhausted.
People are
We just
pretty
want to play something different for a
fatigued.
while.
Yeah.
I hope Spell Hunter comes back.
Yeah.
Hey,
Spell
I
Hunter
never
seems
stopped playing
real
it.
good.
I've been playing it on ladder this entire time. So I'm just happy it'll be better.
I just really like
Yeah.
playing
Yes.
Odd Hunter. That was just a really enjoyable experience for me. I was able to just
Rexar
punch
got
the ladder
so much
fast.
better with the new beasts.
Oh, it
There's
did.
so many good
it's-
combinations now that
Oh,
are just
wow.
amazing.
I'll have to try it.
Like,
Ru-
yeah.
Rush and Lifesteal.
Yes.
That's where it's at.
Jeez.
Rush and Poisonous.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that too.
That's even
Yeah,
worse.
just like I had chances against Warlock because of that
Float bat.
not just that, but the
Bert.
spider that has Russian
Bert, Bert.
poison. The spider that has Russian
Oh,
poison that you can just add to
It's
something
the
else
5
to make its
mana
body a
1/3.
bit bigger. Yeah. You just like put that on something and
gross.
then next turn take out a Void Lord, take out, whatever else they've got facing you.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm really happy they made the decision to change the card pool of Rexar. Because remember, initially they were like, we're not going to add any more cards to the pool. I'm really happy they decided to change that.
I'm
What-
looking up the card.
do you
'cause
think
it's
all
driving
about
me
Spike?
crazy.
What
Sorry?
do y'all think about Spiteful Summoner? That got changed to 7 instead of 6.
Not enough.
No, really?
I think it's not enough.
Turn 7? Come on. I think
Well,
that-
here's why I think it's not enough is because if they drop it on 6, that feels broken because you can't do anything to it. But there's a lot of games where they don't drop it on 6, they drop it on 7 or 8, and it's the same problem. Because
Well,
here's
here's
the
the
problem:
thing.
is the pool from what it draws from almost guarantees them an incredible card.
But you have time to answer it, right? You've got more of a chance to get a board to
a
get the cards
turn?
you need to answer it. And they have one more turn to accidentally draw both of their 10 mana spells, and then it's worthless.
Okay,
Well,
I wanted to answer
yes.
this too before Grant and Eve kind of go at it a little bit more for my entertainment. First of all, Vilebrood Skitterer is the name of the common one attack, 3 health beast that's 5 mana and Hunter with poisonous and rush. Vilebrood
that is
Skitterer.
a
That's something
good
to put on your
card.
dashboard. What other cards in Spiteful Summoner decks are 6 mana that you can fit? There's none. Outside of a 6 mana
You got Karn, which is the 6 mana 4/5 with Death Rattle.
Karen. Yeah,
You
Karen
can
can
fit him.
Karen can work.
Yeah, Karen.
There's
Karen,
also
Black Knight.
Argent Commander and Black Knight.
Everyone's always trying to bring back Black Knight.
Knight's okay.
Had to
The
say it.
problem is like killing stuff with him now feels like there's just not enough targets and how good silence is and cheap it is. So I don't know. I was thinking about this too, Grant. What about an odd centric deck that runs Spiteful now, and you just go for a 9 mana play with Hunter? It seems really interesting, and like I'm not really quite sure how you want to bridge the gap there.
I don't see that being. Because the reason Spiteful works now at all is because the pool for the big guys is so small. You start opening it up to other minions because there's a lot of like derpy minions that cost a lot that don't have good stats on them, and I don't know. It seems like I just kind of feel bad if you accidentally pulled the. You know
Again,
what I mean?
I'm like
So
far reaching on this statement. I
You might be.
realize that, but I'm just saying.
that's why-
like, there's not. Really
but I like that you
anything
asked
to
the question.
Transition there, right?
Yeah.
Like, how do you transition to turn 7 on a deck that's like 1 on 2 on 3 on 4 on 5?
Well, I mean, because like with Druid, like they don't want to run a single spell that is not a 10-drop spell, because all of a sudden Spiteful goes from being like busted to being meh, not worth the cost that you paid for the 4/4 body. So they won't run a single other spell for that reason. Not even like Spreading Plague is worth running, even though Spreading Plague is good. You know what I mean? Because the 6-drop pool has too much variance in it. So that's
Hell,
just my
the
thoughts.
9-drop pool has a 1/1.
Heck yeah, it does. Shoot, you could pull the dragon collar. Oh yeah, a 2/2. You know what I mean?
I mean, even the
So-
8 mana pool is bad. They've got that
Yeah.
silver guard something that's like 8 mana 3/3
Yeah.
death rattle summon a recruit a minion from your deck. A 10
Mhm.
You don't want that.
minion or something like that.
Yep.
I don't want that.
But I still think a 7-drop card summoning a 10-drop something like 12/12 is still pretty strong. I mean, that's still pretty strong.
No
And
doubt.
if you don't
I'm
have
just-
exactly the right removal,
I don't know if it does anything per se for the power level of the card. I think I agree with that statement, but I'm not sure that I agree that the entire deck archetype is going to be unchanged or relatively unchanged because of the power.
it'll
of
be
waiting a
minor.
turn.
Well, here's the thing. I don't think they're worried about the power of Druid right now. What they were worried about was Warlock and Paladin. What they were
Yeah.
worried about was when they brought Warlock and Paladin down, that all of a sudden Druid would be that much better and it might supplant them. So they were like, okay, while we're at it, let's just make Spiteful Summoner one more and we'll kind of cover our butts. But I don't think Spiteful Summoner is oppressive right now. I don't think it's something that is seen everywhere and everyone's losing to, and it's like this incredible deck because it has so much variance. You know how many times I've played that and gotten both of my ultimate infestations within the first 4 turns?
Yeah,
Like
it's variance,
there's so
though.
many things that have to go right with that deck, and there's so many things that can go wrong.
I think
Because-
the biggest problem when it was back-to-back Spiteful Summoners, that is just I know that doesn't happen all the time, but it's just kind of like
That's the
It's
flip
like,
side
okay.
of the coin, right? You got the double draws of an UI, or you got the double draws of Spiteful, and you're holding it in your mulligan. You're like, this game is over.
yeah. But like Grant said, that the pool is so small, and when they pull out a Tyrantus, which is like 20% chance of getting that or 15%, I can't remember. Like
It's a 1 in 5.
it's like really high for. So it's just like when they get that, you're like, well, all right.
You have a 40% chance of drawing a 12/12. That's
20.
that's
20.
all I need.
I don't know. Maybe it's because I'm an aggro player,
Oh,
but
you're including
by
Deathwing in
turn
that.
Deathwing.
7, I think that's okay. For somebody to have built an entire deck around that, and that's their win condition, and if they get it, they get it. I think that's okay on turn 7. That's pretty close to turn
It's
10.
Dr. Boom back in the day.
For me, like honestly, that's fine. If I'm a mid-range player or an aggro player, I hope to have you dead by that point.
There's a lot
or
of times
near
where you
death.
beat that deck with Hunter on turn 7 if they don't have it.
I could
And
see
there's
that.
So a
couple
maybe
times
for the-
where if you're
12-12
running like
has to
Hunter's
hit
Mark,
you a couple of times in the face before it can actually kill you. So it's not like it has rush.
it's almost like a 2
or sorry,
turn
charge.
Because it's like turn
yeah,
7's
it
when
comes
you're
out,
getting
but then
hit.
it just sits there.
Now
and
turn
it doesn't
7's
have
when
taunt.
they show it.
None of those 10 cost cards had taunt. If any of them did, this might be a different conversation.
Right.
But you can just
I could
ignore
agree
them
with that.
and go right by.
So what you're saying is
So-
Mage, Hunter, and Rogue can just, and maybe even a super fast Paladin could just win the game before that.
Yes,
even a
absolutely.
factor.
Saying there's a chance.
So you're
I'm
saying
saying
there's a
that
chance.
I would be playing Spiteful Summoner if there was a chance that a taunt will pop out. And I
Ah.
don't because it doesn't.
Yeah, I usually don't keep Spiteful Summoner when I'm placed if I know I'm facing aggro because there's no taunts that come out of it, and
Yep.
I need to control the board to just draw into it later in the game if I have control of the board. So,
Mm.
but still, turn 7. A lot of times you don't. How many times you just play Spiteful Summoner on turn 7, 8, 9, like Grant, like you were saying, but I don't know. I think it still
Still
will
strong.
be played, but just not as
It will.
I guess up.
Mhm.
There'll be less free wins. Let's put it that way. I guess that's the
Yeah,
way.
I'd agree to that.
Like
'cause
turn
you
5
can't
Spiteful.
hold a 7-mana minion in your hand
Yeah.
and like hope the
Yeah,
game's gonna turn out good.
If you have coin and you have Spiteful Summoner, you keep it because it's turn 5 and you're getting so many stats. But if
I've
it's like
held
turn
Leroy
7
in my
or,
hand
yeah.
before.
Leroy's not 7 mana.
He's 6.
All right.
So many
Uh,
factors to consider.
Before,
Yeah.
before
We need to
finish
we need to
up
keep
this
moving. We're getting
discussion,
bogged
we gotta
down
keep
here.
Going.
Yes.
So I would
Okay,
like
all right.
Novelist, what are you most excited about after the changes hit to run a couple test spins on?
I think I mentioned it, Spell Hunter. I'm excited to see that because really Void Lord shuts that deck down if they get it out early. It's just
Yeah.
kind of hard because you don't run any silent. Obviously, there's no
Yeah, you can't.
silences that are spell. Yeah, you're not priest.
Freezing
so
trap if you get
know.
lucky. If you can play it
Yes.
properly and get that Void Lord back in their hand is nice, but they generally play around that.
They see
Yeah.
they're not attacking. They're just gonna leave it there. They're
Yeah.
wall you have to get through. Like I'm not, And
Mhm.
so I think Spell Hunter is like one of the main list I'm looking forward to. Rush Warrior, the list you were playing for UHL. I'm looking forward to trying that out because I think you're not worried about Void Lords coming down too early. I think that's a good tempo deck to play, especially what we'll see go for. I think we'll see a lot more Murloc Paladin, and I think that can do well against Murloc Paladin. People are just going to automatically, I think, switch over to Murloc Paladin and start playing that. You'll see more Odd Hunter, like Rob was saying. I think people will try that
And Odd
again.
Rogue.
So, but Odd
Even
Rogue, yes, a lot of
Shaman.
Odd Rogue. You'll see. Even Shaman. Well, okay, and I'm looking forward to trying Shaman. Bodicus put a list out. It's not an even Shaman, but it's a value Shaman. Just plays Battle Cries,
Mm-hmm.
Hagatha, and then it plays Shutterwalk just to get value off of that.
Yep.
And I think that deck will be pretty good because that deck
Yep.
struggles against Warlock,
Mm.
which is most decks. And so slowing
Mhm.
that deck and like just making Warlock a little bit more even with the playing field. I think Shaman and Warrior will come back. So I'm excited to experiment with more Shaman decks and more Warrior decks.
Yeah, I'm
as we
excited
go
for
forward.
the even warrior deck I had been playing prior, because
Mhm.
it already matched up pretty even with Warlock as it was. So I'm excited to keep going there. But yeah, I'm kind of like this. Card nerfs in a lot of ways, when you get a lot of them all at once, they definitely feel like a new meta. So
Yeah, it's
in a
true.
new game, even if the same cards are being played, there's still a lot of experimentation. But we need to
Ooh,
move.
One last thing though, real quick,
go
if
ahead.
you don't mind. I opened a golden spiteful summoner, and I knew that card would be nerfed one day, so I held on to it,
Nice.
and now it's being nerfed, and I'm
Oh,
just like, yes. I did it. I'm like,
1,600
it's
gold.
broken. I'm like, it's broken. It's gonna have to be nerfed one day. It's gonna. So I'm just
Uh-huh.
like, I was vindicated. So anyway, we can go on. Sorry.
Vindication, ladies and gentlemen. Eve, why don't you talk about the tournament mode beta launching soon, and then we'll go
Yeah,
into
they
the
gave us a
Togwaggle Druid.
bit more information. They said tournament mode beta is to launch around the middle of the year. I love these kind of vague timelines they give us.
The double announcement of announcements.
Everything will be handled in client. You can play in the tournaments anywhere, whether you're at home or out at a fireside gathering. The initial functionality will include matchmaking and deck checking, with more features coming over time. There will not be bans included at the start, but they want community feedback to feature very strongly in how they go forward. So it's going to kind of be like very bare bones, and then based on community feedback, they're going to slowly add more features. So when you get your hands on it and start to play it, like wait until then to start giving feedback. We don't have it yet, so please don't give feedback before you even see it. Please
Predictive
wait until
feedback.
wait till you get your hands on it, you play it a bit, and you experience it. Because sometimes we think we want features. We have all these ideas of like what would be the best thing, and sometimes something a bit more pared down works better than we think it will. So please experience it first when we finally get it, and then based on that, give them lots of feedback, because they want to add more and more features depending on what people say. They are going to give it to us in atypical or non-typical Blizzard fashion, buggy, like very beta. There's going to be problems with it. It's not going to be polished. It's not going to be perfect. So expect there to be missing features, problems, things like that. They're going to give it to us before it's done. Yeah. So it's going to be interesting.
Just for the sake of testing, remember, when you're doing a true beta, when you're testing something and you want to give feedback, do your best to interpret the game in all platforms. That's PC, tablets, and iPhones or smartphones. There's a lot of people that do a lot of like very hypercritical feedback of Hearthstone, that they want certain things that it's like, so please tell me how you would like to operate this in the space that you're provided on a very small screen. Because that's what needs to be interpreted by this. Not so much whether or not the game can be run on mobile. That's not an issue anymore. It's more or less the space that they have in which to work.
Yeah,
and
visual
excuse
space.
me, the way of the space that they can maneuver it so that it's easy to read and understand in that small space. Let's go to the deck of the week. We have Iron Rays, Togwaggle Druid. Novelist, you and Grant, I have the floor.
Oh boy, howdy. I have been looking forward to talking about this deck because last week Rob just kind of tongue in cheek suggested it like, hey, there's this Togwaggle deck. I'm like, oh yeah, the one in wild. And he's like, no, standard. And I said, ha, sir, you jest. Anyway, so Wicked Good posted in the Discord a link to a Reddit link to this guy, Iron Ray, who had got the legend with this deck. And I was like, well, maybe it was just lucky. Maybe he just like is the only person on the planet that knows how to play it. Maybe he hit easy matchups, yada yada. So I'm like, well, I'm gonna look at it. So I read it down, and I'm like, you know what? Okay, I think I got a handle on what he's saying. So I'm gonna start playing it. Well, basically, I was floundering around on the ladder around rank 7. I was going to rank 7, drop to 8, rank 7, drop to 8, and I was playing a bunch of different stuff. So I'm like, all right, Togwaggle time. What do I care? Got nothing to lose here. So I started playing it. And I started winning, and I started winning, and I started winning, and I'm like, this seems strange. Why am I winning so much with this deck? And it wasn't like I was playing weird stuff. I was playing the boogeymen, the warlocks and the paladins and the priests and everybody else. And I was like, I think there's something to this deck. So I started really like sciencing the crap out of this thing. So before I get into like the epistle that I wrote about this deck, let's talk about what cards are actually included in this deck. You have 2 innervates, and I'll kind of like discuss why they're included. Innervates are basically used to one of the main goals of the deck is you're trying to draw the crap out of your deck, and sometimes you just need innervates to just either pitch. You can use them really good against mages to kind of proc counter spells and things like that. You can use them to get out stuff just sooner than needs to, as everybody knows, even though they only give you 1 extra mana as opposed to 2. If it was 2, it'd be busted. But that's kind of why those are there. Probably even a flex spot in the deck. It runs 2 Lesser Jasper Spellstones. Super good, again, for proccing counter spells. Very useful for getting rid of minions, especially with the amount of armor draw that you get in. Spellstones are just crazy good in this. Naturalize are one of your main win conditions. You definitely need 2 of those. We'll talk about specifically later how those are used. Wild Growth, mostly for card draw, but also if you're playing an aggro deck, they're very, 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 very useful for getting rid of those pesky Henge Clan Thugs, Flappy Birds, Mana Worms, Sorcerer's Apprentices, let's see, all kinds of stuff that you can think of that have 3 health. Everything. So Branching Path is probably one of the most useful cards in here because the options. Generally speaking, I almost always use this one for armor gain, but in a pinch, it really can get you cards. So Ironwood Golem is mostly a stall. It's a means of just thinning your deck out by means of the next card, Oaken Summons. Oaken Summons, even sometimes just the 6 armor it gives you is worth it just by itself late game. Swipe, board clear. Very rarely have I used it to like finish somebody off. Usually it's just to take care of minions. Twig of the World Tree, probably the most contested card in this deck. Some people think that it's people ask me, I don't have that card because really it hasn't seen play. Do I need this card? I'm going to go ahead and say you probably should have it, although I don't think that it's seminal. I've won most of my games without breaking this weapon. Most of the games that I've won. Not by a small margin, either by a pretty big margin. Big Game Hunter, BGH, he is back in this deck. BGH exists in this deck because Spiteful decks exist. So I'll be interested to see what is with the new changes and the nerfs, if that card is even a card I need to worry about having in there. Got 2 Nourishes. Nourish is very, very often used for card draw, almost more than ramp, just because the goal of the deck is to like get to draw your whole deck. That's pretty much it. Is kind of like a miracle style of play. Starfall, just board clear. Flexible board clear works pretty good. Spreading Plague buys you time, especially against paladins and the rogues and the shamans and stuff like that. Spreading Plague can be your best friend. Azalina Sulf, Thief, is part of the win con. Being able to dump your deck and then have all their win cons in your hand, because that's usually what happens, is just, it's a beautiful feeling. Malfurion the Pestilent, survivability, and also stalls the game out. King Togwaggle, the main win condition and the namesake of the deck. And 2 ultimate infestations, and yes, 2. Even though you don't always use 2, you want to because you almost always end up casting at least one of them. So let's get into it. I'm gonna get super general on the mulligan. Generally speaking, you're always mulliganing for Wild Growth and Oaken Summons, Wrath, and or Jasper Spellstones. Those are the ones you want the most. If you think you're playing against a spiteful deck, you want to really try and get a BGH because that's how you lose. If they don't get spiteful out and like drop and have a Tarantus, until it's late game, you can deal with it. But because you have some options, you might have some armor for sustainability. But if they get it on turn 6 or I guess now turn 7 and you have no answer to it, you're going to have a really bad time and they're probably going to beat you pretty quick. When you are playing like aggro matchups like hunters, mages, things like that, you want removal, but you still want to keep the Wild Growths and the Oaken Summons because that's just kind of the best thing to get the ball rolling. Because if you don't have something for them to chew on while you're trying to draw through your deck, they're just going to beat you down and you just have no options. Because almost always you need a turn to kind of like set things up and let them do some face damage before you can kill them. I don't mind keeping a swipe if I have everything else in my hand. I never keep my win cons. Never keep those. Don't worry about those so much. Those always get in your hands because you draw so much. So the way I think about this deck, and guys, feel free to jump in and ask questions because there's a lot of what about this and what about that people have basically been asking in this deck. But I have basically broken this deck down into 4 win conditions. This deck has 4 ways that you win with this deck, and it's kind of interesting because I've never actually thought of a deck as being that diverse. The primary win condition, like the thing you want to do, is you want to get your Twig of the World tree out, get it down to 1 charge, and then you're going to play Togwaggle, get your deck down to 0 cards. You play Togwaggle, it switches your deck. You get their deck, and they have no cards. And then you play both Naturalizes, so they draw through, which does 15 damage. So with all the damage it does to them, plus the fatigue from the start of their turn, it does 15 damage. Then you break the last charge of your weapon, and then you steal their deck with Azalina. And then when you steal their deck, you steal the King's Ransom. So they'll ransom and get their deck back, but then you can just ransom it and take their deck. And so then they have nothing. That's kind of like if everything goes perfectly swimmingly during the game, that's what you're going to do. That has happened to see. I've played my record with this deck since I started playing it is 20-12. I have done that twice in 32 games. If that tells you how difficult it is to pull that off. Okay. So how have I won 20 games? Well, the next 2 win conditions are the next 3 are the ones that you tend to use more often. Now, by the way, I say win con A, B, and C. It's not necessarily in order of importance. It's just kind of how as I thought of them. Win con B is you'll cycle through your deck, and one of the things you try to do, especially if you're playing like a warlock or a priest or another druid, you cycle through your deck and then you fill their opponent's hand with 10 cards, however it means you do. So like sometimes I'll go Naturalize, Togwaggle, they have 10 cards in their hand, and it burns the King's Ransom cards, so they can't get their deck back. You get to keep their deck and they have nothing. And then they just fatigue out pretty quickly. If you can go Naturalize, Togwaggle, Naturalize, that even speeds up the process. That can be pretty gross. I've even done it where it's Naturalize, Togwaggle, because sometimes they just don't have enough. You don't really always know what they have in their hand, but that just kind of is a mean thing to do to them. And they might even have some decent answers, but it's hard to stop that fatigue clock when you've got it going, especially if you played your cards right and you've used a lot. You have a lot of armor because you can, when you have potential for 24 armor just from and it's more than that. If you have 24 armor just from branching paths alone, that's a lot of stuff to get through for any deck, especially if you can stall them out at all. A lot of times that particular strategy is you let them punch you in the face and you're like, you know what, I'm going to cast Azalina now after I've taken your deck and you can't do anything, and I'll just have your cards, and what great cards you have in your hand, I think I'll use them on you. So I did that against a priest. I did it that way. And then I used Azalina, and then I saw that he had a mitt full of Mind Blasts, and I'm like, okay, I'll just kill you that way. It's pretty. You get pretty inventive with how you can beat them. The next win con, I call it the break glass in case of emergency strategy. There are some decks running around, especially if for some reason this deck becomes popular that runs Skulking Geist. Well, why is Skulking Geist bad? Well, because it burns your Naturalizes, which is one of your big win cons. And against control matchups, Naturalize is the card you need, and you need to save it for burning cards, not for removing minions if you can at all help it. And so what you kind of have to do is you have to stall late game. You stall. And by the way, at this point in time, Togwaggle's useless. If they burn Naturalize, Togwaggle really just doesn't matter anymore. He's just a 8/8 cost 5/5 body that's not good at that point. So what you do is you Azalina becomes the primary win condition, and you kind of like you have to kind of guesstimate. So like one game I played was against a control mage, and they geisted early game and burned my Naturalizes, and I was like, shoot. Then they played Jaina, and I tried to manage their elementals as best I could. And then I realized that they had all these cards they're just kind of holding. I'm like, okay, Azalina, now I have all their win conditions. And what I got was I got their Alex, and I got their Alanas, and I got all that stuff. And so before they could do, and their Lich Kings that they had in their hand. And so I got all those for nothing. I cast the first Lich King. It gave me Magic Shell. And then they had to clear that. And then I cast Alana and filled up the board. And then they froze everything. And they thought, okay, I'm going to cast my Flame Strike that I knew they had in their hand because I had a Flame Strike in my hand. And then I cast Magic Shell, put it out of range, and I won. So I beat them with their own cards. So now, that doesn't necessarily mean that's going to happen. But if they cast a Skulking Geist on you, that's basically your only option. So that's the only way you're going to win those types of matchups. Last win con is the kind of the strategy you're going to use against any fast deck. Mage, Rogue, Hunter, even a lot of times, sometimes Paladin. Basically, the goal is survive, because eventually you can run them out of stuff. You keep drawing through your deck. You kind of go on plan A or B where you're still trying to cycle, but what you're mostly concerned about is walling them out, making them have to deal with your board full of scarabs from spreading plague. You have a good amount of removal to deal with. You have a ton of armor, like a mage. A mage just once you start armoring up, they can't do anything to you because they just run out of burn. They just flat out have a very limited amount of burn unless they run an Antonitis or something like that. But they'll do is if they play Alaneth, you're probably going to win as long as you're not down low. If you have any kind of health and you have any kind of armor cards in your hands, you're just going to win because they're going to draw, and you can just like accelerate that process by killing their minions with Naturalizes and like either burn cards or just get them through their deck fast, and they fatigue out real fast. So those decks are just about survivability, and most of the time you will win without ever casting a Togwaggle or an Azalina. It's just spreading plague, armoring, and all that stuff just to stay out of range from them to kill you. So that's generally how you play the deck. There's lots of other side conditions. So my friends on the other end of the podcast, any questions?
I just want to go on record by saying right here, right now, I hate everything about this deck.
Oh, do you?
I was so excited to hear about it, and then I realized this is the very thing that tilted me off the face of the earth earlier today by stealing my deck and then copying my hand, and then when I tried to get it back with ransom, just taking it right back again and then killing me. Yeah, feels bad to lose to. Really, really frustrating and awful to lose to. I was just gonna say that. So
Skulking Geist.
Thank you for bringing this into the world and propagating it across Hearthstone's community.
One of the things I like.
What? Go ahead, Navalis.
I was just saying one of the things I like about this deck is people are trying to figure out what you're playing the entire time because it's not something you see. So they're just playing their game plan. They're playing. You can tell they're playing like they're kind of hesitant about playing it because they'll bring a card out, bring it back, they'll drop it. Then they just like pause for a second, then pass because they're just like you're not really doing anything, and it's just like they're trying to figure out exactly, and then you play Twig of the World Tree. Anytime you see Twig of the World Tree and a Druid, you know something bad is about to happen, or they're trying to do something that's not like.
But I was expecting big bodies. Yeah. Like I was expecting like a whole bunch of huge big bodies to come out like next turn, and then it was not that at all.
Well,
I was
go ahead, Alice. No,
I was going to say, my first game I played against a mid-range, and they played Rexar. And they started making minions, but they weren't playing them, and they were just playing their minions first. And so, and I had Twig out, so I'm just like, like I started just like going face with Twig, started on turn 5. And so on turn 10, I had like, he had no cards in his deck. I had like, basically, I think he had 2 or 3 cards, and I had basically no cards in my deck because I just kind of drew everything. And then I play the combo, and I get his hand. I have all these big minions. And you can see him just pause. I pass the turn, he pauses, and just concedes. And it's like, it was
Well,
great. I was like,
I'll tell you one of the really perplexing things that I can tell you that perplexes my opponent. Like you said, there's little tells they give like long times of inactivity. We're like, what is he doing? And here's the one. Like, so sometimes I'll break my Twig early game. Like the thing about this deck, and this may, and anybody feel free to call me out on it, but there are times where I reasoned it's like, you know what? I don't want to save my Twig for Azalina. Because that's why you have it, is so that you can steal their King's Ransom and steal their deck with Azalina in the same turn. And I was like, you know what? I have a lot of cards on my hand. I need to just get through my deck fast. So UI, bunch of cards, Twig, get rid of those cards. Next turn, draw more cards. So you get a huge amount of cycle over the span of 2 turns. And it's funny that when you break the Twig, they expect you to like put some fatties on the board. And when you just cycle more cards, you can tell they're going, what? Why would you do that? Oh, this guy sucks. He's a noob. And then you burn their deck in half, and you're like, now I'm mad. I mean, it's just those kinds of things, those modular. And that's why I keep playing the deck, is because I thought, well, Faladin would probably be faster, but man, I just like screwing with people like this, like because
I still love you, Grant.
Yeah, we just won't play each other on this deck. And the thing is you can get down low health. You can get down 6 health, 4 health, stuff like that, and come back and have like 30 armor and just be totally fine.
That's also amusing for aggro players to watch happen.
Well, by the time you get 30 armor, you also have a pretty decent board of spreading plague scarabs, and you're just like, go ahead, try to win.
You can even beat them with like if they're just like still trying to wait and figure out what you're doing as like a mid-range or a control deck. They're just like super confused, and then you can run your spreading plagues and then just double branching paths and kill them. So there's also that.
And that's a win condition that like I think it's easy to forget about, because one of the things I've noticed with people who will play this deck, if they say, oh, I tried it but I didn't get it, they get really, really hyper focused on, I have to do the win condition kind of the way,
a very specific way.
The very specific way. Like if I'm not using Azalina and the Twig and Togwaggle on the same turn, then I'm not doing it right. It's like, no, you don't understand. And that's sort of a skill cap thing. You know what I mean? Like,
sure.
For me, most of the games that I've won, most of them have either been by fatiguing out my opponent, like walling them out, saying, nope, you don't get to win anymore with armor and scarabs, or I see that they have 8 cards in their hand, and then I naturalize, Togwaggle, naturalize again, and they don't get the King's Ransom. And then you just win from there. And then
you fill the hand, they don't get the ransom at all.
Because once you start fatiguing them out like that, and you have their cards, your main goal at that point is to survive. And usually you have a lot of survival mechanisms in it. And if you don't have a good hand, then you just play Azalina, because you'll have her in your hand by that point usually. And you just take what they have and you just use it against them. It's like they fall on their own sword. In fact, I saw, what was it? I played a priest today who played Glimmerroot, and I didn't know what he took. And he got his hand down to like 4 or 5 cards. And I'm like, oh, he knows what I'm up to.
I'm going to find out.
And then he does a silly thing. And then he's like, UI. He casts UI and fills his hand back. And I'm like, oh, I win now. I'm like, he didn't know what I was doing. So that is, if you see the deck, so that, if you realize what's going on, you need to dump your hand. Because otherwise it's really easy to kill you. And nobody does it. Like Warlocks just keep tapping. They keep getting stuff in their hands. But honestly, control decks, it's tricky to keep less than 6 cards in your hand. You know what I mean? It's hard.
It really is. It can
That's
be.
not aggro's problem.
Well, the other thing too is like even mid-range decks don't want to overcommit to the board because they have no clue what's going on. And even when they do, they still don't want to overcommit because of Spreading Plague. So it's like, and also Starfire, because you have so many options at your disposal. And the best part is, if they overcommit and you don't have it, you still get the cycle. And if they and then you can definitely punish them the following turn. And then if you do have it, then they're punished. So you have like all of these options, and there's only a few things that you're going to run up in the ladder against that are unfavored. And when we say unfavored, it means that this deck doesn't really feel unfavored as much as it feels like you A, can beat yourself, and B, you have to pilot the deck very differently than you kind of normally understand how to win, right? Yeah. So, Novelist, do you want to talk a little bit about some of the times when you were playing this and you're like, I'm not really sure what to do here, or maybe I think I'd beat myself on this one? Like, what are those type of moments that players might be running into when they play this?
Like I said, it's a skill-intensive deck. I play the wild version of this one, which is a little bit different, quite a lot. But you have the Aviana, Coon, and then basically the Togwaggle, and then with Azalina. So it's very similar. It has a lot of the similar cards, basically, those two cards, basically, Aviana and Coon. Some of the things I ran into this is balancing your health and your armor, and knowing when to, like, should I use this card? I think Branching Pass is a very skill-intensive card in this deck, because when I was playing this, I only played one UI. I played my first UI. I ramped up. I played it, got a bunch of cards, but I didn't have my combo pieces. And I was playing. I forgot who I was playing against, but I had the choice. I'm like, do I armor up with it, or do I draw cards with it? And I chose drawing cards because my hand was pretty full. And I know I was not going to play the second UI, because I already had that. Like, I'm not going to play that so I figured, like, okay, I'm going to start using cards, but I'm going to draw 2 cards because it costs 4 mana. And I drew into my combo to win the game. I think that's one of the things you have to be careful of, because your mindset is like, okay, it's an aggro deck or this deck, and I'm just gonna armor up and pass or something like that. And it's like, well, you're not going to play like another UI, because it's going to overdraw you and everything else. And I found that's one of the things, you kind of have to balance out with a deck, and also when to use removal. I found that out, like, especially the naturalize. You have to kind of like decide, like, okay, because I use my naturalize because I figured I had the twig down. I was going to do the combo, and so I used my naturalizes against my opponent just to help him draw through his deck, basically, so I could do the combo. And sometimes you have to pick your win condition, kind of like Grant was saying. You have to kind of, like, halfway through the game, you kind of start leaning towards a certain win condition. Like, I think it's going this way, so I'm going to play my game style to pull off the full combo, because I have Twig out right now, and I have one of the combo pieces, so that's the route I'm going to go. And sometimes it's like, okay, I don't have the Twig, but it's a control deck, and I'm going to play the Togwaggle plus Naturalize to make sure he doesn't get the ransom card. And that's your win condition. So you have to wait kind of to, like, the right moment to do that. But I think the biggest thing is just when to play the combo to switch the decks also. Yeah, I think that's one of the hardest things. It's like, because sometimes you don't do it when they have 0 cards or 2 cards. Sometimes you're like, okay, I have 3 or 4 cards, and I know what those are. So then you have to keep track of your own deck too, what you have in there, because sometimes you have to trade early, and you're like, but all I have in there is an Innervate. Say I have an Innervate, a Wild Growth, and a Swipe, and let's say like a Starfall. I have those, like, 4 cards left in my deck. Those really kill me if I trade now. And then you have to kind of balance that thought out. And it's not an autopilot deck. Grant and I were talking, it's not an autopilot. You have to think when you play this. So it's like, if you want to play this, I wouldn't recommend playing this right before you go to bed or something, because your mind's like, don't do that. It's a lot of thinking, a lot of it's basically almost feels like a next level game. It's teaching you to play the next level, like the mind game, basically. And which I like it. It really, even if you lose, you think back, like, okay, how could I have done this differently? You think, okay, I could have gained armor here. I could have drawn a card. I could have played Togwaggle their turn, because there's a whole different, I guess, level to play at with this deck.
No, you're not wrong. And I was thinking what you said, like, there are 3 cards in this deck that, like, can mess you up if you don't use them right: Nourish, Branching Paths, and Naturalize. You know what I mean? And, like, on the one hand, like, and you kind of talked about Branching Paths really well, Nevelis, because you have to decide how those are going to be used. But I think the side conversation about those cards is you have to learn how to cycle 100% efficiently, because if you have too many cards in your hand, you're not going to be able to cycle well, because you have to like cycle with the means. Okay, if I cycle this turn, what can I play next turn so that I can cycle as much as I can? So if I play Nourish now, cycle cards, what can I do maybe during this turn to open my hand up for next turn so I can cycle and maybe play some stuff, maybe do removal. And like doing that juggling act is what makes this deck tricky. And it naturalizes tricky because sometimes you just like, well, I can't leave a 12/12 Lich King on the board. I have to do something to that. So I guess, I have to just kill it, because otherwise I die anyways. And sometimes you just make those decisions knowing that it's ruining your win condition, but you lose anyways if you don't kill it. So, those kinds of things you have to always be thinking about, like, if I play this, what is the result? And what is the secondary result? And what is the tertiary result? You know what I mean?
Yeah, and like looking at the deck list too, I listened to Top Deck Kings where Cream Puff was talking about the wild version of this at length, and I knew that Novels had played the wild one quite a bit when you were prepping. I think one of your what's the decks, that's one of the decks you covered, right?
I think so. I talked about
You might have talked about it, maybe not at length, but you definitely talked about it at least once. So when I was looking at that list in particular and then comparing it with this one, I noticed that I feel like the Innervate and the second Innervate and the second UI definitely on paper could be the most replaceable cards in the deck. Because of just how they operate, typically speaking. Usually you're going to use the second Innervate only in very fringe cases, or you will use one of them as an emergency at some place during the game, and then you use the second one later on for the combo. And then the second copy of UI typically is Azalina Food, where it just kind of fits into the other one. So the second copy ends up becoming consistency for draw to like get it and use it. And the second one ends up just going away anyways. So you could definitely have some sense of meta call on those cards as being flex spots. So for now, I think that they should be there. But in the future, as you're looking towards specific matchup winning type content, you were going to look at maybe those type of cards. Because I found that, even in my one game that I played on ladder with the deck, I think that Big Game Hunter, seems like such a good pick in a standard build, because you don't have Kunin and Aviana. So those are like two big cards. You're like, well, I can either include tech, or I can have some form of flexible card like Starfall. And man, Starfall and BGH seem like really, really good ideas for this kind of a build for standard, and given what we're seeing on the ladder, right? And
those cards do work. Those cards do work
so
every
much
game.
work. Yeah. So
They
I can
really
even
do.
see if you really want to run double BGH, because I know that the warrior, the odd warrior, the odd wallet warrior that I was running, or it might have even just been regular wallet warrior, because I ran 3 different warrior lists 2 or 3 weeks ago that I was playing. And again, I know the meta's changed a lot, but I definitely feel like BGH is the card that has kind of overperformed this meta, and I really am glad to kind of see it kind of making a little bit more of a return.
Yes.
All right. Well, I think we're going a little long, so I'm going to go ahead and close out the show. Eve, would you like to do a lore segment before I close? Or
Nah, we're good. We got a long show.
Yeah, this is a little bit longer with the card nurse, so hopefully
You know
next
me, I
week-
don't like to rush something in on the end. I like to have a little bit of time, so.
Yeah, we have some exciting gnomes for you guys as a little bit of a teaser for next week. So we're gonna bring in some
Looking forward to that.
gnomes next week. We also have a special request from Beef Squatch, which I had regretfully missed somewhere along the lines that Eve was able to remind me of, but he requested the soundbite as a patron for
Gravel Snout Knight?
Gravel Snout Knight, which is a Kobold's 1-mana 2/3 card. That's right. It's like a Kobold riding a mole that summons a 1-mana minion at random 1-mana minion for your opponent. And he wants me to do the entrance sound for this card, I believe, which is
Yeah, I think so. I'm pretty sure.
Let's see if I can remember it. I checked it
remember
out
it
at the
at
beginning
all.
of Snow. I'm gonna play it on the show here, and then I'll try to match it. If you're on the live stream, you can hear it, but if you're not,
Onward, Snuffle Snout!
he goes, "Onward, Sniffle snout.
That's pretty good.
That's pretty close.
Candle!
And then when he attacks,
man.
he goes, for candle!
That's good, dude.
That was
All right.
good. Good
My
job.
kobolds have
Bravo,
been
bro,
getting
bravo.
pretty good because I'm watching a lot of Critical Role, and I played some D&D last night with shout out my buddies over Cap Correlator and Smiley Chris in the community. You guys are awesome. Thanks for helping me put together D&D. I've been having a lot of fun. We had our second session last night. We're trying to do it on Saturdays, our time. So to close out the show, if you guys want to if you like Velen's Chosen, you want to share it with your friends, you can head over to velenschosen.com and also the links page if you want to find anything else you're looking for. You can also just go over to the standard page if you're looking for the deck list. Guys, I say this every week, and I always get the question, where's the deck list? It's in the show notes. Go to the website, and next time I get another one of these asked questions, without fail,
We need
I
to
will
make
give you
sure
a
all-
let me Google that for you link. I promise. I will send you one.
We need to make sure all our links are working though, because I did have some people say they tried to email from the web page and it didn't work. So let's just make sure all
Yeah.
of our links are working.
Yeah, on the links page in particular, I can see that for the email. The email and the stream link were broken for a little bit, so I'm gonna go double check the email one. But I did fix the stream one because they had to shift the stream from one stream to the other, and people were saying it wasn't linking properly. So thank you for the heads up. If something is broken, please let us know. Then we won't
We
send
do
you let
have
me
new
Google that for you. links.
Patreon supporters.
But we have another way you can support us, and that is for free. And that's not just listening. You guys can hit us up with iTunes reviews. We have not gotten an iTunes review in quite a while, and we really would appreciate it if you could leave one. We get a global, we have a global client that I've been using that lets us know if you left us an iTunes review, regardless of what country you're in. So please leave those. And if they're in Spanish or Japanese, I will do my best. But if there's
If they're in
something
French,
else,
I will do my
then
best.
I'll have Eve do it because she's from Canada and she knows every language other than the ones that's English. So just kidding.
If I can read it, I can say it. If it's in kanji, I will not be able to handle it. But if I can read it, then I can pronounce it.
If it's in Japanese kanji, I can help you. But if it's in Chinese, God bless, my Mandarin's really bad. I tried learning some tongue twisters for my students when I was in China, and that was a mess. So anyways, if you guys want to support the show financially speaking, Novelist knows all about that because he is one of our patrons. So Novelist, you want to talk about that real quick?
Sure, you can go. We're talking about the Patreon, right?
Yeah, just Patreon.
Sorry, my
Yes.
mind just
I
my
just went blank
mind
after
just
your
wandered. It's
curveball.
late at night. Okay.
Here, catch.
It's like I'm sitting here like listening, nodding, smiling, and you're like, you talk about this. Yeah. You can go to the what is the website? It's patreon.com/Velen, right? To go there
That's right.
to
Absolutely.
Got it.
there's different tier levels you can do with different perks and everything.
That's right.
I believe the $5 perk you get to say make Rob or Grant or Eve, or even if a guest comes on, make them say something funny. I'm sure.
Yeah.
Do you want to say
and,
something
that's-
funny?
Are you trying to hint? Are you trying to drop hints on me, Novelist?
No,
Wink,
no,
wink,
no,
nudge, nudge,
no,
by a
no. If
clue.
I ever come back on, if someone requests that, then maybe. Okay.
Okay, gotta get
But,
time to practice.
I have time to practice. I need at least like 2 minutes, okay, to come with. Anyway, but no, that's where you can go support it. It would help out the show a lot. It would help out the all you guys, and I know my small contribution helps Eve build up her Druid collection for the UHL and and everything. So I had to throw that in there.
Gotta do it. Gotta do it. The
Oh,
Druid DM is
yeah.
strong with this one, gents. If you guys want to support us, please do that. It helps us out way more than you realize with how regular content works and how expansions are frequent and expensive. So I'm sure a lot of our players understand that. And if you're throwing us just a little bit of chump change, that adds up, and it really does, and it helps a lot. And chump change is no chump change for Velen's Chosen, so we really appreciate every dollar that you guys help to support us. Moving forward, if you want to find Grant and Eve, where can people find you? We'll start with Grant, and we'll move to Eve, and then Novelist.
Tweet at me at WatchmanHS. Friend me in game, Watchman #1140. Shout out to War Dog for the gold, the 80 gold the other day. That was sweet. Thank you so much. And let's throw it over to Eve now.
Oh yeah, I didn't really talk about UHL this week. I am in UHL with Navalis and had a game against Ziggy Sarah this week, which I was able to get 1 out of the 4 games I won, and then she took the rest of them. Incredible play, really fun games. I recommend you go over to the Twitch channel and watch it, or go to the YouTube channel, United Hearthstone League, and check those out because those were fun. And also got a chance to cast Ridiculous Hat and Spivey's game with Wicked Good. We had a fun time casting that, and man, that was some blazing fast play. So check those out as well. You can find me on Twitter at LoreMasterEve. I've been streaming kind of on and off on both my Twitch channel where I stream Destiny and the Valen's Chosen podcast channel on Twitch where I play Hearthstone and UHL occasionally. Just one more thing for the patrons. I put up a new episode, Gul'dan Part 1, because he's got a thick story, and there's going to be probably several parts. But the first part of my new lore moment for Gul'dan is up for the patrons only, and there's also one on Illidan in the vault at the moment. So if you become a new patron, you have access to those.
Awesome.
Hype.
All right. I guess it's my turn.
Yep.
Okay.
Yes.
Before I go to where you can find me, I just want to thank you, Rob, Grant, Eve, for having me on. It's been fun, and
Of course.
appreciate all you guys do and everything. So
Aw.
Aw.
thank you. And
Labor of love.
all right, so you can find. Hey, it's share the love, right, guys? So on Twitter, you can find me at WhatTheDeckHS. If you go there, you can find my YouTube channel that I post my past episodes. If you can find my personal Twitter there, then my personal Instagram, you can find all of that stuff just at WhatTheDeckHS on Twitter, and that's where you can find everything. And then if you want to add me in game, my BattleNet tag is Navilis #1630. That's Navilis #1630, and we can hit up some games and play, have some fun. I think I've done it pretty much with all of you guys, so it's always been a good time. It doesn't have to be for Gold Quest. We can just hit me up like, hey, I have this crazy deck, and I'm more than willing to try something out. And especially with the chair feature, you can share each other's decks now, which is really cool.
Ooh.
Very much so.
Yeah, Novelist, do you happen to have a link for us for where we can find the UHL podcast in the case that Eve and I forget to put it in the show notes and talk about it on our show?
I will send that to you. If you go to unitedhearthstone.com, you can find it on there, I believe, but I'll send you a link so you can put
Okay.
if that would work.
Okay. Yeah,
Because I don't have it with
the,
me.
text-based recap, but it looks like there's a YouTube recap page that is probably where the podcast is.
If you,
looks like there's.
If you just go, if you go on Podbean or iTunes and just look for search in United Hearthstone League, you'll find the podcast.
Okay.
And so
United Hearthstone League, the rundown is really good. That's one I
Yes.
listened
the rundown. Okay.
to. Yeah.
I will
the
put that in
rundown.
the show
That's the
notes.
one I'm on. So
Yeah, that was great.
yes.
I love listening to it. You guys are so good. You do such a
And
good
so
job.
thank you. Yeah, it's quite fun. We have, I'll give this to you now. We have Versika on for the guest this week, so that should be
Ooh, spicy.
that should be fun. Yes.
All right. If
They've
you
had
guys wanna
Mike Lowe
find-
in the past as well.
If you guys want to find all that information, just go to their website. I have linked in the show notes. You can find anything else that you're looking for there, or you can tweet at them on Twitter and ask also Ferris Biscuit or Nate Wolf. They're really, really active on Twitter to respond as well in relationship to the league. Last up is me. You can find me on Twitter at the tag not Rob. You can find me in my Discord for Velen's Chosen. Anytime you have questions, you can feel free to ask. I've been actually really into answering questions about tech recently. I've been talking with a couple buddies outside of the Discords and just personal messages about microphones and mouse and sensitivities for shooting games. And I even talked with Eve on her stream actually about console sensitivities, and she's been playing around with it a little bit too and playing some games on Destiny with her son. It's been really cool.
It changed my play quite a lot, so thanks for the heads up.
You're
that
welcome.
was
It helps with that
an
awful
interesting
warlock jump on
change.
console, let me tell you. So
Oh my gosh, so awful.
if
Paladin
you guys
best jump.
if you guys like Overwatch, you can head over to omniclab.com or you can search for them. We had a map mastery episode with CarQ Games, and boy, was that a really fun episode this week. You'll see that coming up on the stream soon. We got some cool stuff coming with the anniversary event launching the same day as our card nerfs. And last we have the Calm Before the Storm kickoff Kickstarter that is now up, and they have almost, if not hit by now, their second stretch goal. So if you know anything about Patreon, you probably heard about it from Kickstarter in the first place. Kickstarter is basically a one-time project support, and they bill you at the end for what you're pledging for. Patreon's more of like a consistent support basis subscription type fee, even though it's more of just like, I want to support somebody for free, who does something for free, and I want to give them some finances of mine to help them out. But in Kickstarter, they have 4 stretch goals and a main goal. So the main goal is basically that they can have like a meet and greet, a bunch of really cool people at BlizzCon, and etc. And the second stretch goal is to basically expand that ballroom to be double the size and have a ginormous art gallery with a raffle. So if you want to support Velen's Chosen, I will likely be at BlizzCon. Maybe not representing Velen's. I don't know if they're going to be trying to put me on two of the podcast panels if we do them again or not. I don't know, because Andres is on a different podcast, and technically that would leave only one host left for Omnic Lab if you could choose to represent Al Recap. So I don't know what they're going to do there. But if you get to the third and fourth stretch goal is for World of Podcasts. So as of right now, it's not there yet as far as a fully equipped room. But if you want to help us out, please support us at Calm Before the Storm Kickstarter, and the link is in the description. And I am going to start the music on the live stream before I forget. But thank you guys so much for joining us on episode 141 of Velen's Chosen. Togwaggle is what the deck? We'll see you next week. And special thanks again, Novelist, for joining us. I know it felt a little forced with the community, but it turned out to be a really, really fun episode.
I knew it would be good. No doubts.
Thank you. It was fun. I enjoyed it.
Anytime. Remember, not a whole lot or a loss. See you guys next week.
Onwards, never sound.
Now King Julian version. Quick, go.
Never snout. Fetch me the maid. I need a nice goblet.
You have to go watch the video of that. Go watch it.
I love my dog.
The music is still playing, by the way. For those of you that are watching on YouTube, leave a like. Lets us know that you're not a view bot. And if you're on Twitch, thank you guys for joining us for the live stream. It's been great having you.
We haven't pimped our merch in a long time. I feel like we should. We have good merch, people. We have nice shirts. See my shirts?
Did I miss it?
It's a
I
nice
need to
shirt.
go buy one. It's a nice shirt.
So I know you guys can't hear this, but on the outro music, and he was like, "Haven't you seen my shirt?" And like you hear the Doomsayer go, "Did I miss it?"
That's great.
That was such perfect timing.
That's gonna make the blooper reel for the audio. That's too good.
Oh, that's good.
All right, guys. I'm going to close the live stream. You guys are great. Thank you so much for coming. Andrew popping in. Man, everybody's here this week. Bye, guys.
Oh, yeah. All right.